Madrid, a colourful mecca for motor racing fans as the stage is set for the first European race of the 1970 Formula One World Championship. Spring sunshine beats down on the elegant city and the surrounding countryside, and in the little village of Sant Agustin, it's siesta time as nearby the automotive matadors move in. The Spanish make much of their heroes, and in Madrid they idolise the football team that for many years was unbeatable and 6 times won the European Cup. Trophies symbolise a national love of men against the odds, men who make excitement, men who court danger in the afternoon. In Grand Prix, the new rule is that all drivers must qualify and practice for a start in the race, except for an elite of 10 top men. World champions Jackie Stewart, Denny Hulme, Jack Brabham, John Surtees, Graham Hill, and top team drivers Jochen Rindt, Chris Amon, Jean-Pierre Beltoise, Pedro Rodriguez, Jackie Ickx. But in the Italian De Tomaso car, Pierce Courage was one of 12 drivers fighting for a place on the Spanish grid. Failure would cost his entrant, Frank Williams, over £1,000. So how were the top drivers selected?
In fact, they arrived at it by saying we will have any world champion, or any works driver, or even anyone who has won a Grand Prix in the last 2 years. The motivation behind the organisers wanting certain drivers was that in France they had to have Matras, they had to have Beltoise and Servos, Gavin starting. Italy had to have a Ferrari on the grid, and I guess England particularly wanted a BRM.
In a word, do you think this is a good thing for motorsport or not?
It's not, no, it's undemocratic. And it means that certain people who might be another Jimmy Clark would probably never get a chance because they can't qualify in their first Grand Prix against Rindt, Stewart, etc.
Ken Tyrrell, Frank Williams has said that the new system is undemocratic. Is he right?
No, I don't think so. I wouldn't agree with him at all. We have a situation that has arisen this year where there are more Grand Prix cars available to start in any particular race than some circuits can start. There are regulations governing the number of cars that can start, and on the shorter circuits there are fewer cars about. So some system of qualifying had to be introduced. Now, obviously it doesn't satisfy everyone. You can't do this, but I think it is the most sensible solution to the problem.
Johnny Servos Gavin qualified in practice for a drive in the second of the Tyrrell team marches, sporting inboard rear discs and a new suspension. The car started without side fuel tanks, but ended up using them in the race. And at the front, new nose fins replaced the original design, still being used on Joe Siffert's team march car. Indianapolis winner Mario Andretti was another of the drivers who were required to qualify under the new system. Did he think that seeding was designed more for the benefit of race organisers than the drivers?
Well, I think so. I think perhaps a lot of the organizers that are really strongly behind this don't fully understand auto racing, in my opinion, because if they would really know just the caliber of Formula One race drivers, or say the first 10, they could, I'm sure that they would be willing to take the chance to just have them earn a position because they know they will earn it anyway. In other words, what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a bit of insurance for themselves because they're paying these drivers starting money and so forth, and they want to see them in the field regardless. But 99% of the times you're going to see them in the field, so I don't see any reason for this sort of a situation like they're trying to create now.
Does it worry you that this may have a broader effect on motorsport as a whole, in as much as it'll probably frighten off the small private entrant?
Well, it certainly will. Like I said, they're giving the advantage to people that don't need an advantage.
With that in mind, how would world champion Jackie Stewart feel if, instead of being guaranteed a race, he had to qualify like everyone else?
Well, I would have no objections to qualifying. I think, in a sense, that it's better for all if each and every one of us have to qualify. I said this some time ago, in fact, and I think that it should still be that way. But, of course, the organisers say that they want to have a guarantee for television, for their sponsors, etc., to have, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 world champions appear at a race meeting, therefore being able to give them top billing, bring in people, and ensure the sponsors or the television company that they're getting this at least for their money.
Yet Bruce McLaren, value for anyone's money with 100 Grands Prix behind him, has to play second fiddle in his own team to Denny Hulme, just because of the new rules of the game.
Roll over, Bart. To you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Jochen, happy birthday to you.
Jochen Rindt, 28, on the day before the race, celebrated by putting up his fastest time in the brand new Lotus 72. Colin Chapman's latest car has a completely redesigned front end, wedge-shaped for minimum wind resistance. The slots in the nose are there to provide cooling for the disc brakes, which are now inboard. The anti-dive suspension is also new, and with no radiator in front, Jochen Rindt says he no longer has to worry about hot air blowing up in his face and making him feel sick. Instead, there are 2 radiators, one each side of the cockpit, rather like aircraft jet intakes. The rear end is also new, and below the familiar Ford Cosworth engine, there are inboard disc brakes and another brand new torsion bar suspension system designed to prevent the car squatting down on its haunches. Lotus claim that this car is very much lighter than the old Type 49, and they're trying out a 3-tier aerofoil at the rear. After practice, Jochen Rindt explained how he found the new car.
Well, it needs a bit sorting, but I'm very, very confident, and I'm sure this car will be very, very good.
Has it given you any problems for this race, Jochen?
Not really. We had 1 or 2 small problems, and it's going very, very well, considering it's the first time we really run it. You know, we need a few parts to make it quicker, which we can't do now here because we are so far away from England. But you know, it's going quite well. I mean, it's not I'm not the fastest at the moment, but I'm not very much off.
Out on the twisting circuit, Rindt put up a very respectable time, doing the 2.1 miles in under 85 seconds, but not good enough to rival the best lap, which was done by Jack Brabham. The 44-year-old Australian, 3-times world champion, and his fellow conspirator Ron Toronak were aiming for the double after winning in South Africa last month. And in the other Brabham, Rolf Stommelen was fast enough in practice to earn a place on the grid. 2 French Matras were entered, bright green, the trademark of Henri Pescarolo, who would rely on the potentially very fast V12 for a qualifying performance. Number 1 Matra team driver is Jean-Pierre Beltoise.
Jean-Pierre, how important is it to you as a Frenchman to be a racing driver? Are you aware of being a Frenchman and bringing back the blue colours of France to the racetracks?
Yes, I think it's very important for me to drive and try to win a race on a French blue car.
How important is it to France?
Important for France. Well, it's very important because, you see, before the war, between the 2 wars, France was something very strong in racing, and we want to come back to be the strongest in racing with new young drivers and with Matra and Elf and many.
The unmistakable shape of the Ferrari cooling system made its appearance in the pits after some doubt about whether the Italian team would race at Jarama. But on the day, there was a number 2 painted on 2 red cars, both of them for Le Mans winner Jackie Ickx. The 25-year-old Belgian is an exciting performer to watch on the circuit, but his car failed to finish in South Africa. Alfa Romeo and Andrea de Adamic also represented Italy. In the McLaren colours and looking very much a part of the team, an M7 chassis was bolted onto an Alfa Romeo V8 engine. But in the end, comparatively slow times in practice kept the car out of the final 16 for the grid. After going into the fence on Saturday afternoon, Graham Hill came in with a bent oil radiator and some other damage, none of which was bad enough to keep him out of the race. BRM fielded 3 cars, 2 of them distinctive in their new colours. The team were hoping for better performances after mechanical failures in South Africa and at Brands Hatch. With Rodriguez guaranteed a race, but poor times from George Eaton, it was left to Jackie Oliver to guarantee that there would be at least 2 BRMs at the start. The cars are still very much a part of the Owen Racing organisation, and the new colours are simply inspired by new sponsorship. After testing early in race week, John Surtees was ready to go it alone again. He's confident that his small team can survive and win against the bigger équipes, and with a new car for the British Grand Prix in July, he will be even more competitive. What is his main ambition?
Well, I suppose my main ambition is to either produce a winning car ourselves or get back with a team where we all pull in the same direction.
Would you really like to be a Bruce McLaren or a Jack Brown?
No, I'd rather be a John Surtees.
John, you've seen a lot of circuits all around the world. I wonder if you could describe how difficult this one is for us.
Well, the main difficulty with this one is that it's very much a sort of Mickey Mouse circuit where you haven't got a moment's sort of rest, and you've got slow corners where you're continually using quite a lot of manual effort. And this in turn is one of the reasons why, from a physical point of view, it's very, very tiring.
"90 laps, 190 miles. Difficult enough without trouble at the start. On the grid, Barry Gill.
The chances are that the Spanish Grand Prix, which should start in a few minutes' time, might well be the last one we ever see run here at Urama. Because quite honestly, whatever happens in the race, it cannot compete with the tension and the drama and the misgivings, the emotions and the passion that have taken place here during the past 3 days. Everything has happened. Everything that shouldn't have happened. The seeding, the qualification system, the practice and the timing, all has dissolved into chaos. The reason seems to be that nobody quite understood the rules, least of all the organisers. So we have had practice sessions that we were told didn't count for the grid, practice sessions that suddenly did count. Qualifying sessions that were supposed to have been timed, but we were told weren't timed. Drivers whose times recorded on the official sheets didn't resemble anything on the stopwatches of the people sitting in the pits. We now have a situation with the minutes ticking away to the start where no driver is quite sure how many drivers will be in the race. Some mechanics haven't yet prepared cars for the race, and the people are now throwing up their hands and saying, let everybody start, get into your cars, and it doesn't matter what happens.
Fracas at the start. Officials claimed Graham Hill was late on the grid and tried force to get him off it. Minutes after the race should have started, the chaos continued. After several changes of mind, officials finally told Joe Siffert and 3 others that they wouldn't drive, and the grid was reduced again to 16. Front row, Brabham, Halm, Stewart, then Beltoise, Rodriguez, Amon, Ix and Rindt, Pescarolo, Oliver, McLaren, Surtees, Servas-Gavin and Hill. On the back row, Andretti and Stomberg. Courage had qualified, but crashed in practice. Nuvolari, Fangio, Varzi. Landmarks of the twisting track surrender as Stewart screams ahead of the field on and into Le Mans. Behind him, Halm, Brabham and Rodriguez lead Pescarolo, Beltoise, McLaren and Rindt as they race up the hill to the long right-hander called Ascani. From Portago downhill through the Bugatti S's, the Blue March trumpets as the waiting crowd strain for a glimpse of the champion Scot. But behind him comes disaster. Cutting the hairpin, Jackie Oliver crashes out of control into Jackie Ix. The The two young drivers who shared the winning glory at Le Mans last year incredibly survived the inferno. Flame-proof driving overalls probably saved them both. Jackie Ickx, convalescing in Belgium, says he'll be racing again in a week or two. This is how Jackie Oliver remembers what happened.
I got to my braking zone just behind Jochen Rindt and put the brakes on and went straight to the floor. And I noticed that the inside front wheel were wobbling, almost a blur. Complete brake fade, no brakes at all, so I took to the side of the circuit and tried to cut the hairpin out completely and go straight across the hairpin, missing the hairpin completely, and join the circuit the other side, passing about 3 cars in the process. But as soon as the car got off the circuit onto the rough, of course, I lost complete control of it. And unfortunately, Jackie Ickx, unknown to him, was accelerating out of the hairpin, and I hit him straight in the side. The cars on the first lap have got something like in the regions of 45 gallons each on board. That's 90 gallons of high-octane fuel that explodes everywhere, and it just needs the slightest spark to set it off. We have an internal fire extinguisher system on the car, which I was unable to get to because the dashboard was crumpled badly. So I rolled myself on the grass until the flames were put out, and then collected my sensors, and then ran as quickly as I could to the pits to warn Pedro Rodriguez, my teammate, so that we could bring in him to save a similar drama. Obviously, my front suspension failure happened, so it was obvious it was going to happen to him sooner or later, so we brought the second car in. I believe it was line second, you know, which must have been a rather a shock to him. At the time, of course, you can't really appreciate what's happened to your teammate, and all you're thinking of is that you've been robbed of a possible victory. But since he's cooled down and his maximum temperature has come back to normal, of course he realised that it was the best thing to do.
Rodriguez had been fourth as the 14 survivors fought their way through the flames to keep the race going. Ahead of him, Stewart, Brabham and Halm, and behind, the order unchanged except for Eamon, who dropped back with clutch trouble. On lap 6, McLaren led a bunch of back markers, followed by Rindt, Surtees, Andretti, Servos-Gavin, Hill and Stommelen. But back at the crash, firefighting crews had used water, which only spread the flames and wet the track before they finally resorted to foam. Bugatti hairpin became a nightmare. Even the best, like Brabham, suffered. Yet, despite lost seconds, no one was near enough to take the Australian's third place from him. And soon, with Halm in trouble, Brabham would move up to number 2. Next to succumb was Henri Pescarolo. For a time, he was 4th, but slipped to 5th behind his teammate Beltoise. It looked as though the French cars would have to be reckoned with if only they could finish the 90 laps. On lap 9, Rindt was out with spark box trouble. Halm retired next lap with a broken distributor, and Eamon gave up with clutch and engine problems. Lap 13, McLaren, driving steadily, keeps ahead of Surtees, Andretti, Hill and Stommelen. 3 laps later, and a marshal signals Beltoise that Brabham is fighting to get back into second place after letting the Frenchman through at Bugatti. But minutes later, the treacherous track catches Jack again. The Brabham is way behind as Stewart fights off Beltoise through Monza Bend. But on lap 31, Beltoise is out with a broken engine, and once again a question mark hangs over the Matra V12. Pescarolo in the other team car was lying 4th and going strong on lap 33 when suddenly, in a spectacular way, the engine blew up and Matra hopes ended in a cloud of smoke and dust, leaving the Frenchman to carry his helmet back to the pits. Now, out of 16 starters, only half were still running. On lap 36, Andretti was 6th, leading Stommelen in the German-entered Brabham. The day-glow-coloured march was going well, and it looked as though the American might have his first Grand Prix finish of the season. But minutes later, the treacherous track catches Jack again. The Brabham is way behind as Stewart fights off Beltoise through Monza Bend. The Brabham is out with a broken engine, and once again a question mark hangs over the Matra V12. Pescarolo in the other team car was lying 4th and going strong on lap 34 when suddenly, in a spectacular way, the engine blew up and Matra hopes ended in a cloud of smoke and dust, leaving the Frenchman to carry his helmet back to the pits. Now, out of 16 starters, only half were still running. On lap 37, Andretti was 6th, leading Stommelen in the German-entered Brabham. The day-glow-coloured march was going well, and it looked as though the American might have his first Grand Prix finish of the season. Lap 43, not quite half distance, but the end of the race for Brabham number 24. As young Rolf Stommelin finally abandoned the race with a useless engine, out on the circuit, Stewart was casting anxious eyes in the mirror for signs of the other Brabham, which had begun to close the gap. There were now only 7 cars left in the race. Lap 53, and suddenly the game is really on. Brabham is right on Stewart's tail, forcing the Scot to use everything he knows to hang on to the lead. Now the crowds get their money's worth as 2 champions fight it out at a desperate, dizzy pace. Almost 20 miles the cars clung together. Then, disappointingly, the Brabham's engine gave a puff of smoke and the Australian took the slip road into the pits, out of the race for good. Minutes later, and the last casualty limped in. The red and white McLaren had lost its gears, a bitter blow for a disconsolate John Surtees. 5 laps to go and only 5 cars left. Behind Stewart, McLaren has no one to challenge him for second. Mario Andretti, struggling with his gears for nearly 120 miles, was still fast enough to hold 3rd place. 4th place earned 3 more World Championship points for Graham Hill, giving him a grand total, which equals the all-time record career of the legendary Fangio. And behind him, 5th, Johnny Servo's Gavin brought in the other Tyrrell March. The race was over. All that remained was the smouldering skeleton of a shattered dream and a last triumphant lap for the winner. Jackie Stewart, 30-year-old Scot, driving towards his 11th Grand Prix win. The glory could be shared by the car, the new British March, winning in only its 2nd World Championship race. But only when car number 1 was in sight of the flag did Ken Tyrrell allow himself to believe they'd won.
Were you ever worried, Ken? Well, all through the race, it was obviously that Jack was going to be a great danger.
How do you feel now?
Very happy that he's now leading the championship.
Top of the table, Jackie Stewart 13, then Brabham 9, Hulme and McLaren both on 6, Andretti and Hill 4 each, Beltoise 3, and finally Miles and Servo's Gavin 2. For the Spanish crowd, another hero. For the Grand Prix circus, food for thought as they look forward a fortnight to the next race of the 1970 World Championship, the colourful and spectacular Monaco Grand Prix. Perhaps only Stewart will remember Jarama as a moment of triumph.